Samvit audiobook Sanatan Dharma, Swami Ishwarananda Giri, presented by Ashok Vyas. Chapter Detachment. The Kathopanishad declares some men of steadfastness and keen intellect, desiring immortality, look inwards and search for the immediate self. Even the search for self knowledge is rare, not to speak of its attainment, because the very first requisite is to become inward. This means mind has to be prevented from flowing outward through the senses in order to perceive objects. Because the perception of objects is a great distraction in the vision of self. It is impossible to have knowledge of two entirely different things at a time. All created things are effects of the three gunas of qualities or qualities sattva, raja, or tamas and tamas combined together in varying proportions. The physical object of perception have a predominance of tamas and hence are the grossest. The self is uncreate, unqualified, beyond even the purest form of sattva. So awareness of the self and of the world of duality are poles apart. In order to have one, the other must be given up. What we want is self knowledge. But the question arises, how can we give up sense objects entirely and live? Just as there are ways of possessing, so also are there ways of giving up. We must learn the secret of freeing ourselves from the distraction of sense objects and yet not have to do away with them. Though it sounds like having the cake and eating it too. This is possible. The yoga of detachment, which we shall presently see, promises to accomplish this. In Sanskrit, the word for sense object is Vishaya. By its very construction, it means that which binds. That an inert object should have the power to bind a thinking being doesn't stand to reason. Yet we see in practical life that instead of men possessing objects, objects possess men. Without the necessity of any exertion on their part, sense objects can order a man to do anything lie, steal, murder, betray, or, if you are too decent for these things, at least go against your own wishes and comforts. The shop window display a suit of very fine stuff cut to the latest fashion. It stabs you every time you pass that shop on your way to office. You kill yourself with extra work and save for months, going without your evening tea, visits to restaurants, and a dozen of other luxuries, all for the sake of that suit in the shop window. It was just lying there inert, but it had the capacity to arouse in you the desire to possess it. Rather, you allowed that desire to arise in you because you thought it was very beautiful and life would be miserable without it. So, actually, we bind ourselves with our desires. Objects are just occasions, catalysts in this huge chain reaction of transmigration. In the Mahabharata, the wise Bhishma extols salutations unto the Lord who is of the form of delusion, which, for the sake of keeping up this world show, deludes all beings with the bonds of attachment. Swami Vidyaranya, in his Panchadashi, a well known work on Vedanta, cites an instance of a woman on the wayside. Her father, husband, and son are accompanying her, and amongst the crowd of passers by, there is a lustful young man, a monk, and a street dog. Suppose you ask each one of them, referring to that woman, what is this? The young man answers, she is a beautiful woman, and his eyes are full of lust. The monk says with his averted gaze, just a bag of flesh and bones. The father readily claims her as daughter, the husband as wife, and the son as mother. And each has a ring of affection in his voice, so different from that of the others. Lastly, if dogs can understand and speak your language, the street dog is bound to tell you it is delicious food for me, and the hunger in the dog's look is entirely different from that in the young man's. You must accept that all the time there has been no change in the person of the women, which the others were seeing, and yet its reaction on them are so strikingly varied. This clearly shows that whatever may be the real nature of objects, the world you see around and have relations with is purely your own creation. It's a colorful, queer pattern seen through the kaleidoscope of your mind. Tilt it a little, and the whole pattern changes. From this, we can safely conclude that the physical presence or actual handling of sense objects is of no criteria, and that by manipulating the mind, we may change and control the reactions of objects on it in such a way that no distraction is created in our search for self knowledge. To put it directly, we must learn to give up attachment to objects. Without this, even if you manage to give up the objects externally, yet they will bind you with the fetters of attachment which have not been broken and powered to dust. King Bharat gave up his sovereign kingdom and practiced austerity in the jungle for years. In the last days, he grew fond of a deer and died thinking of it, grieving to part from it. As a result, he had to be born as a deer. This doesn't mean that Bharat's renunciation and austerities were meaningless, but for them, he couldn't have been born enlightened later as Jada Bharat when that single flaw of attachment to the deer was removed. Many people commit this mistake of going to the other extreme and denying the necessity of outer renunciation to everyone at all times. And they usually take the name of Janaka to justify their case. But how many possess the knowledge and renunciation of Janak? It is told that King Janaka used to go to sage Yagyavalkya ashram daily to attend his spiritual discourses. Encumbered with innumerable royal duties, Janak would very often turn up late and the beloved teacher would wait for him. This irritated the assembled class of thousands of disciples. They began to whisper to each other that even Yagyavalkya was gripped with greed and desire to please his royal customer and get wealth from him. Yagyavalkya was shrewd enough to understand this and decided to remove this suspicion. One day Janak had been exceptionally late and the class proceeded after his arrival as usual. When the discourse was at its peak of interest, a courtier came and hesitatingly approached Janak to deliver a message. Hearing it, Janak waved him away and continued to listen to Yagyavalkya. After some time, the messenger returned and whispered again in Janak's ear. Janak showed some irritation and commanded, "Don't disturb me with such silly talks. Consult the ministers as to what is to be done, and don't again come here before the teaching is finished." The poor courtier withdrew hastily, but soon the minister himself made his appearance and announced in a vexed voice, "O king, the whole city of Mithila is being consumed by flames. All our attempts to put out the conflagration have been in vain. If you tarry here any more, even your dear and near ones will not be saved." Yagyavalkya asked the king anxiously, "Janak, don't you think you should go to save your city and people from the grave situation?" But the king, looking perfectly unperturbed, answered in a firm voice, "Where is mindness for the seekers of knowledge who believe in the inexplicable delusion of the world? If the whole Mithila is burned to ashes, what do I lose?" Even as he was telling this, someone shouted, "Fire! The fire has approached the ashram." In a trice, the whole class was empty. All the disciples fled to save their water pots, loincloths, and deer skins. Yagyavalkya sat smiling to himself as the disciples returned after a few minutes shamefacedly and prostrated before their guru, because when they went into their huts, they found there was no fire, no smoke. It was all an illusion created by their great teacher to reveal to them the sterling worth of Janaka. They understood how, now, why Yagyavalkya showed such love and consideration to him. Under the cloak of royal splendor, Janak nurtured the most intense form of detachment. This is a Herculean task which should not be attempted by everyone, because there is a danger of self delusion making your spiritual life rotten at the core. You will go on enjoying sense objects and getting attached to them, all the while thinking and professing that you are detached. So, the precaution to be taken is to give up the objects of enjoyment entirely now and then, retire into solitude for some time, and lead a life of simplicity, foregoing the accustomed luxuries and conveniences. Then analyze and see if you do not crave for them or feel disturbed by their lack. Any attachment to objects, when detected, should instantly be uprooted by laying the axe of reasoning at it. Charge the mind again and again with the undesirable consequences of that attachment. All things created must one day be destroyed. During the time of its existence, too, a thing can be possessed for a short time only. And what is given to you will one day be taken away. If you put your heart into it, then when the object departs, it is bound to wrench your heart and leave you suffering ever after. Further, when you analyze, it is found that even at the time of possession and enjoyment, the object to which you are attached doesn't give you peace. All the while you are haunted by the fear of it being snatched away from you. How to invest your money safely, get your diseased wife or children cured, maintain the motor car, repair the radio set, whitewash the building, and so on. You worry and plan through sleepless nights and spend the daytime in trying to carry out the plans. There is the leisure and mood for depriving comfort from the objects. You will say, I'm not such a nervous type. I enjoy my comforts coolly. Why should I see fault in the objects? Even then, reasoning must show you that the coolness and peace you enjoy are not caused by the objects. It happens this way. Whenever the desire for any object arises within you, the mind gets ruffled. Restlessness is painful, undesirable state, and this pain you mistake to be the effect of not having the object. So you strive to possess it. Once, when you succeed in this, then the initial desire dies, mind becomes calm once again, and you have the experience of peace and joy. But this state is very short lived. The very next moment, another desire spring up. So the only purpose of material possession is to quieten the wave of desires, not directly create peace or joy. Those who are without desires enjoy this peace even though they may not possess a farthing. That is why the Upanishads were different scales of joy, ananda, ranging from the human up to the bliss of the creator, Brahma are mentioned. To each stage, the cause is added. And this joy belongs also to the learned man who is unconquered by desire. Shrotriyasya chakama hatasya. The same pleasure which you obtain by getting an object with which effort is available to another who has no desire for it at all. Because that pleasure of the former, as we have seen, is nothing but a negation of a self created distraction which is already negated in the later. So, a life given to the sensual pursuits is as meaningless as if one spent all his life in rolling in the dust and washing oneself with elaborate care and then go on repeating the process of rolling and washing. If we wish to be clean and tidy, wisdom lies in avoiding dirt from a distance. That suit which tempts you from the shop window is nothing to a woman, and the diamond necklace in the same window haunts her while you scarcely pay any attention to it. Become alike into a suit and a necklace, not by desiring both of them, but by becoming equally indifferent to both. Objects should be accepted as they come to our lot and used with discretion and detachment so that life may be maintained as a spiritual search for the attainment of real joy. Hence the Gita says, Yukta hara viharasya, yukta cheshtasya karmasu, yukta swapnava bodhasya, yogo bhavati dukkha. He who is temperate in his physical and mental food, action and recreation, sleep and walking, this yoga destroys sorrow. This then is the yoga, the first spiritual exercise in self perfection, to discriminate and detach one's mind inwardly from all sense objects. Then, even while using them for the needs of life, we will remain undisturbed and pure, like the water drop on the lotus leaf. When this state is reached, then we are ready to apply the detached mind to the objects of our search, God, the Atma. We become fit to be upasakas, worshippers, sitting at the altar of God.